think a lot of people in England don't really know what a gerontologist is or a social gerontologist is.
Half the time people can't pronounce gerontology, and it's quite interesting if you actually write gerontology into Word, it keeps underlining it in red.
I suppose what I say is that gerontology is about ageing, and there are different types of ageing. There's individual ageing, there is, if you like, societal ageing, and there's also population ageing. And what I'm really interested in is this age structural change. But then that doesn't mean that you can't then, within that structure, say, okay, this structure is happening, let's look at some of the micro implications.
It means really an understanding of the whole of ageing, the processes of ageing, biological, the processes of ageing socially, and that I suppose the environment in which we grow and age. I think it's looking at all of those things, both individually and society, from a social point of view, and a political point of view. So it's very wide, I think.
That people were saying, it's a multidisciplinary field, What's the field, I used to say, what gerontology needs is a bit more discipline.
So gerontology, it's always been a battle really to try to define, what that area is. And just a year or two back, for university statistics, one has to define what field people in one's department are working in. And I searched down the list for gerontology and did not find it. But there was psychology of old age, so it's very, I think in the UK, it still doesn't quite seem to be a mainstream field, despite the efforts of the BSG over the years. All the courses I'm aware of have been postgraduate. The one in Bangor was a diploma and a master's, and so maybe that's why it's never seen as a mainstream field.
You see, the failure of gerontology academically is the same for the UK as it was in America. There isn't something at the end of it which says you can use this to do A or B. We can get away with it with sociology, we can get away with it with psychology, we can get away with it with language, with the other social sciences. But gerontology, because it's interdisciplinary, you've got this tension, and have had all the time, between being a psychologist on the one hand, or a gerontologist, or a sociologist on the other hand, being a gerontologist.
I suppose if there's something that I'm still lobbying for, it's for the ESRC to recognise gerontology as an administrative, legitimate discipline, so that we don't always have to tick the other box. I think that there's a huge advantage to being a gerontologist in that, because it's so inherently interdisciplinary, it means that you have a very broad field of study ahead of you. And so that provides an immense, rich sort of area of topics, issues, theories, concepts for you to contemplate, to learn, to investigate. And I think that's really exciting. Very exciting. And I think also I feel lucky being a gerontologist in that the colleagues within gerontology that have very different disciplinary backgrounds. So I think there is a huge advantage to being a gerontologist, but also having underlying disciplines below that.
I do define myself as a gerontologist, and it was one of the things that really helped me working in an environment quite often where gerontology isn't a central focus, or ageing research isn't a central focus. So help me, I say, I'm a gerontologist. Ageing research is my area, my passion and my interest.
Well, I certainly have been primarily a social gerontologist for 20, 30 years. And that's because there is a debate about this, isn't there? That quite a lot of people have said to me over the years in different circumstances, you should stay with your base discipline. That's the most important thing. I let geography go.
I remember Bill, by the way, picking me up many years ago because I referred to myself as a psychologist, and he said, "Oh, I'm a gerontologist." And I thought, yes, he's right. Yes, gerontologist comes before psychologist. Yeah.
I suppose at a very basic level, and I'm sure there are lots of people going, "So you're not a gerontologist, Gilly?" But I think it's the marrying of my work and my interest in later life issues, ageing. Yeah, the life course perspective. But with being an information professional, does that make me a gerontologist? I think so. Okay. And I think a gerontologist is more than an academic working within a specific discipline. I think, from my understanding of the word. I think so.
Well, it seems an obvious question, but do you define yourself as a gerontologist?
No,
You don't?
never have, never would,
Okay.
never, ever,
Okay.
ever. Because I think if you're a gerontologist, you do it just on older people,
Right.
and I think ageing is different from older people. Because I'm interested, I suppose, in kind of ageing as part of a life course, firstly, but also I don't just do work on ageing. I do work on health. I do work on sleep. I do work on all sorts of things. Gender and women's employment. Various things. So I think I wouldn't see myself as a gerontologist because I don't do work on older people. But it may be that the work I do, you are doing work with older people. But I don't exclusively say I'm just going to want to work on older people.
I think this is a really interesting question because I'm not sure I do think of myself as a gerontologist. I define myself, I think, by my initial discipline, sociology. I'm a sociologist who studies ageing.
It's an interesting question because when I got promoted here to a chair, you get to choose your title. And I chose the sociology of ageing as my title because I feel closer to that. Part of my rationale is that at least sociology of ageing is closer to what I do and is it more easily identified. Also, social gerontology is a field and it wouldn't tell me anything about myself, and so I would say that I would identify myself as a sociologist of ageing, but one of the subfields is social gerontology.
I define myself, my professional identity is a professor of healthcare for older people. That's how I define myself. And I've had honorary professors since I've left Sheffield in a number of places, and I still use the title professor because I feel I want to profess my subject. And healthcare for older people is broader than geriatrics. I'm very proud of being a doctor as well, but I'm very remote from medical work, which is a sadness to me. In terms of being a gerontologist, I don't define myself as a gerontologist because I'm not at the leading edge of research, but I will be a translator of gerontological research into trying to improve systems of care for older people.
I do define myself, I suppose, still as a clinical psychologist. And I think that would primarily be because for most of my career, clinical practice, involvement with patients has been really important, although not always the majority of my time. Over my career, it's sort of been a steady decline, I suppose, in patient contact to its current sort of zero sort of level. So and also I've been involved until very recently with clinical psychology training programs. So I think that would be my professional identity.
If I'm asked to describe what I have done, I say, well, I started as a gerontologist and now I'm an anthropologist working in cemeteries. I could also, at times, have described myself as a medical sociologist or even a socio-legal researcher. But those were relatively small or short-term pieces of work. And sometimes I suppose I would say that I had researched in the area of social policy, which would bridge everything, even cemeteries.
It's only very recently, I don't know, maybe 5 years back, that I've had the title Professor of Social Gerontology, previously of social policy. I was very happy. I consider myself a sociologist of social policy and ageing. So I'm very happy to have one foot in one camp and one foot in the other. And I think I would be less of a gerontologist if I didn't also work in social policy. So there's so much crossover between what I do in one sphere and another that that's basically who I am.
It took me a long time to self-define as a gerontologist. I would say, I'm a researcher and I've got a background in geography and English. Not I'm a social gerontologist. Because I was a social geographer largely.
I would not have called myself a gerontologist certainly 20 years ago. I would, and I do now. Partly people, I think, have better recognition of the term. There was a time when you'd have to explain, I'm a gerontologist, that means I study aging. I think now you have to possibly add a flavour. You could say, it depends on the context, but I would probably describe myself in most encounters as a biomedical gerontologist, so bridging the biology and the medical side.
I probably define myself more as a gerontologist than a sociologist, but I will use both terms depending on where I am. Or I use the broader term social scientist.
So I might on occasion say, yes, I'm a gerontologist, or I'm a social gerontologist, but I might also say I'm working in social care research, or ageing research, or a number of other hats that you can use. And occasionally I do say I research social work, which is, but I don't do all, that's not the only focus.
Depends who's asking. If it's the National Pensions Convention, I'll call myself a social gerontologist. And for the Age platform, I'm a social gerontologist. But in other fora, I would be a sociologist or a social researcher. So it all depends who I'm talking to, what their interests are. I mean, all those labels are pretty accurate, but they're more relevant to different audiences.
When I was my first job, I was definitely, I would have said I was a health geographer.
Okay.
Because I was I had a geography degree and I was interested in health. So I guess it was by the time I finished my time in Cardiff, I would have said I was a sort of social gerontologist with a small s and a small g. If I'd, depended upon what job I was being interviewed for. But I mean, I would think covertly I thought of myself as that. But quite a lot of the time I had to present myself as something rather different for reasons of employment.
Usually use the term gerontologist or social gerontologist when I didn't want to get to have to explain my way out of some of the baggage that a sociologist label attracts. And if you use the term anthropology, which I quite often do, because that is genuinely my first and prime discipline, many people simply don't know what it is. It then ends up another explanation. So, I mean, gerontology does work and is very very useful in not carrying some of the baggages that other social science labels carry.
Well, what would be really nice would be if the gerontologists thought of me as a gerontologist, and the economists thought of me as an economist, and the statisticians thought of me as a statistician, not that anyone would.